What is going on, investors? Hopefully, you guys are having a great day out there. Time to talk about Square Incorporated, ticker symbol SQ. Over the last year, this thing's up 247%, but year to date, up just 6.5%, and that includes today's loss of about 4% on this one. Now, here's the deal, though. When we get over the stock chart, we'll talk about this one. It has been consolidating really for a while here since December of last year. So talk about this. When a stock kind of goes sideways, a lot of people that have been in this stock for a while expect kind of a rocketing up of a share price. Well, we've pulled forward a ton of that over the last year. Like we said, up 247%. Talk about when a stock goes sideways, what you should potentially do with that type of investment. Now, speaking of what's going on, Square's EPS today, they released their Q1 earnings, which we will get into here in a second. Well, revenue came in at $5 billion. That's up 266% year over year, and it beats analyst estimates by just $1.73 billion. We'll talk about their revenue, which we've talked about here on the channel before, that they are deriving a ton of revenue from Bitcoin. Okay, they're allowing people to buy and sell Bitcoin and other crypto on the Cash App. So we'll talk about the margins on that business. And while revenue growth from this company can be somewhat deceiving, but there is some exciting things going on here. So let's jump over the numbers. So we got 3 months ended here. On the right-hand side is last quarter. Left-hand side is this quarter. We got our revenue here on the top line. They've got this transaction-based revenue. Grew nicely, okay? 758 up to 959. They've got this subscription and service-based revenue grow really nicely from 296 up to 557. These are in thousands. So when I say 557, it's $557 million. You got your hardware revenue here, which is a loss leader. We'll talk about that here in a second. And then finally, you got your Bitcoin revenue, which came in at 3.5, not 3.5 million, $3.5 billion worth of Bitcoin revenue. Where were they last year at this time? 306 million. So they basically they more than 10x'd their Bitcoin revenue. So that's showing you where maybe some of this demand for this Bitcoin price has come from. Last year, total net revenues was 1.38 billion in the quarter. And again, we talked about how that is up huge, up to $5 billion. Now let's talk about this revenue, okay? Because we've got cost of revenue here. We've got our transaction-based revenue. We spent 524 million to make this 959. Those are great margins, and in my opinion, it looks like they could be expanding just slightly because we were here at 465 to make 758 in the previous quarter. You could bust out your calculator and figure this stuff out, but all in all, looking really clean, okay, making over $400 million of gross profit from just that business alone. You got subscription and service base. This is juicy margins, okay? You spent only $88.5 million to make $557 million. The more exciting thing about this is you went from 296 to 557. So you almost doubled subscription and service-based revenue, and the margins on it are fantastic. Okay, you spend 88 to make 557. You do that all day long. I don't care if it's $88. You would do that all day long, let alone 88 million to make $557 million. That is fantastic. The hardware cost is a loss leading product. You spent 40 million to make 28 million. This is traditionally what you would see. You even see this with Verizon and AT&T and companies like that. It's not that big of a deal. Now, here's the thing about Bitcoin. So we talked about how they had $3.5 billion worth of revenue. Well, they spent 3.436 billion. So they're basically it appears to me, they're basically the middleman. Okay. Somebody on the Square app puts the buy on Bitcoin and they're making a tiny spread off those transactions. I tell you what, when you drive this much volume, it's no big deal. I'll take a tiny spread on that. They made, it looks like about $80 million in gross profit. Again, that's off the top of my head. Hopefully that's close. So off of these revenue growths are impressive over at Square, but we have to remind ourselves most of that revenue growth, or the explosive side of that revenue growth, because we bolted on over $3 billion worth of just Bitcoin revenue alone. You have to remind yourself and I say only, it's a lot of money, but they're making only about $80 million gross profit on that. So just keep that in mind. Now, here's the deal, though. total cost of revenue went from $842 up to $4 billion, $4.1 billion. Again, most of that is because as you drive this Bitcoin revenue, they're basically the middleman. So there's a lot of cost associated in there. Look, gross profit on this went from 538 to up to 963. That's exciting. Okay, you almost doubled. Okay, I know we basically, almost 3x'd our revenue, but to double the gross profit or come very close to that should be very exciting if you're an investor in this company or even you want to be. Now, look, we got other expenses here. Product development, sales and marketing, general administrative. They've got these transaction and loan losses. Those came down big time, so that should be exciting for kind of a macro view. You got some Bitcoin impairment losses and some other stuff here. All things being considered, total operating expenses went from $628 million to, we'll just round it up, $900 million in the quarter. Guys, this is a turning point for Square because our gross profit was $963. We minus this $895 and some change, and you get to the operating income of, yes, $67.7 million. That is positive income. And last year, the reason why I'm getting excited about this is last year you lost $90 million. So all things being considered, if Square can keep following up this momentum, and look, I don't think there's any reason to believe they won't continue this momentum across all their business lines, okay? The subscription and software, which is Cash App, the transaction-based revenue, and the Bitcoin, which is a little bit of Cash App too. I think they have momentum behind all of these businesses. The gross margins are baked in. Their operating expenses are nice, keeping nice and tight. This is a profitable company. Now, what we have to keep in mind, they've got $105 billion market cap, okay? And they're clearing just now, turning positive on the operating income side at $67 million. So, the old guys like me still say, look, the stock is still overvalued for sure from a traditional, quote unquote, traditional valuation metric standpoint. This company's still overvalued. But if you can look into the future and keep seeing these types of revenue growth, this type of gross profit off of that revenue growth, well, look, this company should be able to catch up to that valuation at some point. Not saying they'll fully grow into it. This stock couldn't come down, but they're growing into it. Now, let's take a look at the balance sheet. I'll tell you what, I'm going to stop at I'm going to look at the balance sheet, and then we're going to go to the stock chart. I looked at cash flows. I did a little bit of background research. I don't think you necessarily want to analyze this company from cash flows. I'm just going to show you really quick because we pulled down that fantastic net income number of $39 million. Last year, we lost $105, but look, cash flows went from a positive $121 to $97. There's some weird stuff that they have to account for on these cash flows that I don't think makes a lot of sense, in my opinion, when you're analyzing a financial company like this. Look, I don't look at cash flows when I analyze JP Morgan and Wells Fargo and even maybe like a PayPal. I don't really take into account cash flows. So I'm just pointing that out, that I'm not trying to skip the cash flows. I'm just saying I don't think it's necessarily relevant to how we value this company. You can maybe leave me a comment down below, either enlighten me or argue or change my mind, but that's how I'm going to stand right now. Now, the balance sheet starts in December and goes to March. Cash is basically the same. They've got some short-term investments here. They've got these settlement receivables as well, which is interesting. They had to subtract these out on the cash flow statement, but it's an asset here on the balance sheet. Customer funds, even from a balance sheet perspective, customer funds are not, they recognize customer funds as an asset, but obviously Square couldn't fold up shop and put these funds in their pocket unless they all wanted to go to jail. And so when you analyze these companies, you can't just do it by the book every single time. You have to take some of this into account. So with this, I would look at this cash. Cash is looking good. They don't have a lot coming down here on, longer term assets. We have some long-term debt on this one. It's moved up just slightly from about 2.5 up to 2.9. Nothing to be worried about though. Okay. Everything looks super clean on here. Now that they are positive on the operating income side, This is a well capitalized company, in my opinion. Now, coming over the stock chart, something just pops off the screen here. It's very obvious, is that this stock has been consolidated somewhat sideways since December, even before that, basically back into November. We've been between 205 and 240 on this one. Now, have we popped up above it? Yes, we have popped up 2 different times up to close to $275 per share, which is a good $50 higher than where the shares are trading today. The shares are actually trading, I would say, very close to the middle of a range where we've been in, again, for 4 or 5 months now. So I don't mind this, okay? When you have a stock that is on a 247% rally over the last year, the fact that it goes sideways is not concerning. Now, if you're one of these people that are playing options, and if you have all your wealth tied up into Square, you want it to keep going up, it sure is nice. You get used to growth when the stock is up 247% over the last year. You get used to it going up. But what I would tell you is just take a breather. It pulled forward a ton of gains in this stock. It going sideways is an area where you can accumulate these shares over a little bit of a longer period of time without them just continuing to go up to the moon. Now, I do see some things that I would worry about. You have a top here. You have a lower high here. We made lower highs, lower highs. Shorter term, this thing's in a downtrend. Our moving average has rolled over and turned lower. So there's areas down here at 214. This is assuming that this downtrend that we've been in for the last few weeks continues. Down here lower at 205. 205 is an excellent spot. Okay, 205 has held several months now, and it is there. Now, you break 205, well, look, you're probably coming down south of 200, coming down here to 192. I'd be even more excited about that. That's actually the dead low. 190 is about the dead low of where this thing has bottomed out just over the last 4 or 5 months. I tell you what, if you can get it down in that price, which is about $30 where the stock is today, that could be an attractive entry point as well. But I tell you what, you start testing 190, there's some price action down here even lower. And obviously the momentum and the trend on this would be much, much lower than it is now. You could potentially see lows there. Now, this thing reverses. You're looking for a close and a green, nice solid green candle or a gap in green above $240 per share. You don't get above $240 a share on this one, then, it's coming down. Okay, that's just how I see this one. Okay, it's sideways consolidating. If you're trying to accumulate shares of Square, these are your opportunities, in my opinion. You accumulate on sideways or down dips. That's if you want to buy shares of Square. If you're trying to trade it, you're obviously drawing in some lines and doing like that. Now, if you want this thing to go to the moon and have another year where it's going up 240%, I would look for another stock. Okay, if this thing goes up to another 200%, we've got a $200-300 billion market cap on this one. That would make sense to absolutely nobody. You see the short interest is about 8.5% on this one. So it doesn't make sense at the current valuation. If this thing runs up even higher, I tell you what, you'd have even more short sellers coming in on this one. So that was Square. Love the fundamentals. These are fantastic. The valuation, don't love it so much, right? Okay, but the fundamentals are really nice. The stock chart's not bad. It's not great. It's not at a level where I would go out and buy tomorrow, but we're consolidating sideways, which can be areas of accumulation if you want to play that game with this one. Let me know down in the comments what you think about Square. We'll be back again with more videos very soon. Good luck with your investments.